let's say I was working with an athlete and maybe they were struggling to get into position for a deadlift, or they were struggling to get into the bottom of the squat. I could do some of these drills and put them on the floor quick and see if I could figure out if there's any kind of issues that we need to address. So just kind of keep that in mind. So we're going to go through some like just different assessments and kind of fundamental positions. So really quick before we go through some of the assessments and stuff, basically when it comes to powerlifting and it comes to like basic human movement, we like to kind of use a joint by joint approach. This is popularized by a coach named Mike Boyle and a physical therapist named Ray Cook. But essentially, like the body is a stack of joints, and they kind of alternate between some joints need a little bit more mobility, and some joints need a little bit more stability. So when we talk about stability, it's your ability to resist motion, and also your ability to hold a position for a certain period of time. And then when we talk about mobility, it's actually the joint going through like a range of motion. Okay. And then stability and mobility are related, and mobility and flexibility are related. But sometimes you could be flexible in like a static position, but you might not have the mobility to get in like a position dynamically. So it's a little bit different. And sometimes you might perceive a mobility problem could actually be a strength or a stability problem. So like if someone, like for example, is really flexible but they can't get into a deep squat, it's probably because that they don't have the strength to kind of hold those positions, and they don't have the stability to hold those positions. So going through some of these assessments could help identify if someone has more, if they need to work on more stability, or if they need to more work on mobility. But in general, we want to hit these areas. So like, we want to have stable feet. We want to have the feet rooted in the ground. We want to have mobile ankles. That's going to allow you to, specifically the movement is called dorsiflexion, so the ability to pull your toe toward your shin. Okay, that's going to allow you to keep your feet flat. We want to have stable knees, so we don't want the knees kind of collapsing inward or rotating around when we squat. We want to make sure that that's a stable joint. Hips, it's kind of like a little bit, there's a lot of complexes here, but in general, we want a lot of mobility. So in order to get in a deep squat, a sumo deadlift, in order to lock out a deadlift, in order to get a good bench arch, we need a lot of mobility at the hips. When we talk about the pelvis and the low back area, we want a lot of stability there. So in general, we want the spine to remain neutral. We want to get the motion from our hips. We want to learn to move our hips independent from our spine. So we want this trunk, this whole trunk, this pelvis, and this lumbar spine and pelvis area, we want that to be very stable. Okay. For the upper back, we want a little bit more mobility in the upper spine. So that's called your thoracic spine. Okay. And then there's some other, and then we want, in general, when we're powerlifting, we do want, in general, for life, we do want the scapula to be able to move, but in general, we want the scapula to be pinned down. So we want a little bit more stability for our scapula when we're doing a bench press or a squat or a deadlift. We don't want the scapula moving around a lot. And then we can kind of keep going all in all, but in general, this is like, again, this joint by joint theory. It's a good way to kind of look at the body. All right. So a couple of things that we could do to look at, like, see if maybe he's got some deficiencies, or maybe I've watched him squat. But one thing I also want to point out for the coaches is that everything, and future coaches, there are some of the future interns that are going to be here. Everything that we do is an assessment, so I don't necessarily have to like get someone on a table, and to be honest, I would rather not if I don't have to. Just watching someone do a bodyweight squat, watching someone do a deadlift is good. Now, if there's a situation where I can't figure out like maybe how to correct a movement fault, then this is where a situation where I might get them on a table or on the floor. So I just want to kind of go through, like, and also you'll kind of see some of these movements are going to be similar to some of the warm-ups we do. So there's like a reason for that, so I can kind of start to piece some of these things together. So the first one that we do is called active straight leg raise, and this could be, again, part of a warm-up as well, but it's a really good assessment. So what I'm doing here is I'm going to assess his hip range of motion. So without moving this leg or bending this knee, I want you to bring this leg up as high as you can. Okay. So I kind of knew that Joe was a little limited here, so that's why I kind of picked him, but that's fine. This is like, and I don't want to, one thing I also want to, again, I know Joe for a while. If this was his day, I wouldn't be like, I wouldn't tell you, you have really crappy, hip mobility. That's like not like a great thing to say, right? Like I don't want to, you always want to try and come from more of a position of empowerment, but just so that for coaches here, It's just, so I might not, if I see that, I might not, you know, again, I've known Joe for a while now, so it's a little bit different. We have a different relationship, but if it was day one, I wouldn't be like, man, it's like, that's really crappy. Like, your spine's gonna explode. I wouldn't say that, right? So that's probably something you don't want to do, right? So just in general. But I know that Joe tends to have a little bit hard time, and you could keeping your back straight on deadlift sometimes, right?
For sure.
And this is, so now to me, it's not necessarily a stability problem. This is telling me this is probably a mobility issue. Okay, so this is something we can work on. I also noticed that this could also change day to day. So let's say he's got really tight hamstrings for whatever reason, or his hamstrings are really sore. It's going to affect this test a little bit. So this could change day to day, but in general. And then we're going to get like, I'll probably get like Mel or Emily to come up, and you'll see like their hips going to look way different. But so for now, so let's look at this again. Okay, so so this is about 70-ish degrees or so. This is like kind of like bare minimum for like someone to be able to deadlift from the floor. Now, in a conventional deadlift, this is like going to be straight like this. No, it's going to be slightly bent, right? So and you can see like when I take the tension off his hamstring, he's able to get a lot deeper, right? So one thing I would watch out for him, maybe he's got like the minimum requirement, maybe deadlift from the floor, but maybe a stiff leg deadlift might be a challenge, so I might modify. I might say, hey, we're not going to stiff leg deadlift yet. Maybe you need to do a sumo stiff leg deadlift, or maybe you need to do a stiff-legged block pull, or maybe you need to do an RDL, because he's not going to be able to have enough hip flexion. That's what that movement is, hip flexion, in order to actually reach the floor. Does that kind of make sense? So like, when people say like, oh yeah, so if something's programmed in our program, and you know, people that have been here can attest to this, just because something's written down doesn't mean that they're going to do it. So if I see like someone, I might modify or make it lighter or adjust the range of motion accordingly. Okay. So let's see the other side. Not the same, so that's good. If there's a big asymmetry, that could be something just to note as well. You're going to be a little asymmetrical side to side, so don't be alarmed. Like everyone's going to be different. So that's what we call, that's hip flexion, and that's with the knee, with the knee extended. Okay. Now if I keep the knee flexed, this is more of a test of a squat. So again, still, you know, not super loose here, but you know, decent. So his hip crease is slightly below his knee. So Joe has enough mobility to do a legal squat for powerlifting. Now, if he was trying to be a weightlifter and he needed to squat like, you know, butt to ankles, we may need to work on it a little bit, but he's not a weightlifter. He's just doing powerlifting. He's so like, now if someone was here, they might, again, not have enough hip flexion to get into a legal depth for a powerlifting squat. But could they still squat slightly above parallel? Sure, and they can do it safely, and it's going to be fine. Okay. The other thing that I can look at here is this called like a hip scour test. So here you can feel it's kind of jamming up. So this would be like a really close stance squat. So he's a little bit better, kind of like in that medium stance. If I go really wide, it gets worse again. So he's kind of like more comfortable. He's probably more comfortable in this range here. So that's going to tell me that Joe's going to probably be like a medium stance squatter. If he wanted to one day like say, hey, coach, I want to do sumo deadlifts, he would need to work on this because he's not really comfortable in like that wide position when he's abducted and more externally rotated. Does that make sense? Okay, so that's hip flexion. Okay, so if someone was trying to figure out squat width, stance width, this is a good test to do that. That's called hip scour test. So I want to see where I can get the deepest. Have you guys ever seen the difference? Some people squat with their toes like really straight ahead, and other people like have to duck their toes out. If you don't have a lot of internal rotation of the hip, you need more toe flare, okay? Because you don't have the internal rotation to handle that, okay? Joe has a lot of what? He's a lot of internal rotation, so he can squat with his feet very straight ahead. So that's going to be more comfortable for his body. Not as much external. Opposite of me. So if I tried to have Joe squat like me, that would not really work for his body. Does that make sense? So when people are like, you have to squat with your toes straight ahead. You got to squat wide. Everyone's different, so I need to respect like his anatomy and his body, okay? For a powerlifting style squat, that you need to break parallel a little bit, which is, I think, typically a fine place for most people to kind of train. I don't see a lot of restrictions in the ankles typically, because you don't need, but if I want to be in a weightlifter and I need to squat all the way down, then I can see the ankles as being an issue a lot of times, okay? So it just depends on what your goal is. So for the average person, if you're working with like average population, if they're squatting to like parallel, that's fine. So you probably don't need to worry about the ankles that much. That being said, I think it's important to kind of warm them up and maybe loosen up the calves and things like that so you can have a little bit more dorsiflexion just so they're squatting more efficiently. But in general, I think for most people, kind of, doing a little bit more, spending more time on stretching the hips and, working on hip mobility exercises, I think it's going to be more, your time's going to be spent, more well spent. If you're a weightlifter, then I think the ankles become more of an issue, or if you're just somebody that like has like some sort of weird attraction to squatting like really deep. But like for me, I'd rather and this is a good question. Like, if someone's not a competitive powerlifter, like why would they want to squat below parallel, or just whatever, or any range of motion? Just having some sort of standard of range of motion, I think, is important so you can measure progress. So like if I'm like, oh, well, I'm not a powerlifter, so I'm just going to squat whatever. If sometimes you squat 2 inches below parallel, sometimes you squat 1 inch below parallel, sometimes you squat 2 inches high or 2 inches above parallel, or 1 inch, it's really hard to figure out if you're making progress or not. So so that being said, as long as you're consistently hitting a similar depth and your numbers are going up, then you kind of know you're getting stronger. So for bench and deadlifts, a little bit easy. It's like, did you touch your chest or not? So that's your range of motion, right? So that's pretty simple. If someone was a general population, obviously they could board press, floor press, whatever, but as long as you have some sort of standard for range of motion and those numbers are increasing, you know you're getting stronger. And then same thing for the deadlift. If someone was, so like my dad did his first deadlift workout the other day, he started out doing a block pull, and that was fine for him. He's not trying to do a meet anytime soon, so he doesn't have to necessarily pull from the floor. Okay, and again, that's what kind of going with powerlifting with people is all about.